Imagine a man living in the 20th century. He has everything at his fingertips. A smartphone in his pocket. Uninterrupted Wi-Fi flowing through the air. Entertainment available with just a single swipe. Every passing moment of his day can be filled with sound, with images, with comfort. And yet this very man is often the one carrying the deepest, most invisible emptiness inside. This is the paradox of convenience. A paradox that defines our age. We live in an era where men, instead of standing up to confront fear, to wrestle with challenge, to embark on the brutal but necessary journey of identity, are increasingly drawn toward quick escapes. Video games, social media, pornography, short, flashy videos that dazzle the eyes but starve the soul. These are not just distractions. They are engineered addictions designed to hijack the male psyche. Pleasure, once meant to be a reward for effort, has now become the guiding principle of life. And when a man lives for pleasure, he slowly begins to erode. He loses his strength. He ceases to be a builder, a force, a creator. He becomes a chaser, chasing tiny, meaningless spikes of dopamine, drip by drip, like a man drinking salt water to quench his thirst. He isn't bound by chains. He's lulled to sleep by convenience. He isn't forced to bow his head. He bows voluntarily beneath the false applause of empty validation. And it's not a conspiracy, it's a design. Nearly a century ago, Aldous Huxley warned us. In Brave New World, he imagined a future where humans would give up freedom, not because they were tortured, not because they were locked away, but because they were given pleasure too quickly, too easily. A society where people no longer fight for meaning, because they've been made too comfortable to care. There was no pain, but there was also no depth, no ambition, no rebellion, no individuality. That was fiction. But to date, it has become real. Not through prisons, but through phones. Not through soldiers, but through sales. Not through whips, but through dopamine. The modern man, the one who once symbolized rebellion, growth, risk, now sleeps peacefully in the silk-wrapped arms of the pleasure culture. This is not peace, it is sedation. And it's time to wake up. But to do so, we must first see the system for what it truly is. A machinery of manipulation. It includes the technology we use, the ads we mindlessly scroll past, the unconscious habits we think we choose but that were chosen for us. The rest of this message is a journey deep into the psyche of the modern man, to reignite the fire that this world has quietly extinguished through comfort. And like any fire, it begins with a spark, a single truth that must be faced, no matter how uncomfortable. Pleasure is not freedom. It is a sweet trap. You think you're making choices, but in reality, you are being chosen by algorithms that know your brain better than you do. In the classical economy, the most valuable resources were gold, oil, and labor. But in the modern pleasure economy, the most precious commodity is your attention. And you, the modern man, have become an open-pit gold mine, not mined with shovels, but with memes, short videos, and dopamine-colored notifications. You're no longer the customer. You're the product. And all the free content you consume on social media, mobile games, and video platforms, that isn't generosity. It's a trap wrapped in sugar, a psychological snare designed to keep you hooked, not happy. Because algorithms don't care about your well-being. They care about your engagement. They want you to scroll longer, tap harder, swipe faster. And to do that, they must fracture your focus into hundreds of micro moments, just enough to prevent you from ever thinking deeply or living deliberately. So let's look at the average day of a modern man. Wakes up, grabs the phone before even brushing his teeth. During work, opens TikTok for just 5 minutes of fun, ends up losing 30. On the ride home, ears flooded with entertaining podcasts, eyes glued to endless reels. At night, too tired to read, he says, and Netflix wins again. Not a single moment of stillness. Not one pause to examine the interior world. No anchors for clarity. No room for vision. No space for freedom. This is the invisible war of our time. The war on male attention. Because constant distraction is the fastest way to kill a man's soul. Men, biologically, are built for focus. To track, to pursue, to lock onto a target and not let go. Since the earliest days of humanity, the male brain has been shaped to hunt, either prey or purpose. So when you allow distraction to dominate your day, you don't just waste time, you lose the very thing that makes you a man. You stop being the one who pulls the arrow and start being the one dragged behind it. And that's exactly what the pleasure economy wants. A generation of men who can no longer lock in. Men who no longer live with intent, but react with impulse. The more easily stimulated you are, the more easily manipulated you become. The less you can command your attention, the more you can be sold. Not with money, but with the next suggestion. Not by force, but by comfort. Not by threat, but by pleasure. Think about this. If your focus is an arrow, what have you aimed it at today? Is there a mission? A calling? Or is your entire day just a series of reactions, clicks, swipes, and scrolling dictated by someone else's algorithm? The answer to that question will determine your role in the global system. Are you a player or a pawn? A man with direction or a profitable distraction? Because a man who no longer knows what he wants is not living, he is dying. Not from bullets, not from hunger, but from apathy, from swipes, from meaningless motion, and days that leave no mark. This is the spiritual erosion of masculinity. And it's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. It happens while you're entertained. It happens while you laugh at reels. It happens while you say, "I'll do it later." But eventually, one day, you'll wake up with a perfectly curated feed, 1,000 hours of screen time, and a hollow life. And that's when the world wins. That's when the system has succeeded, not in destroying you, but in distracting you from ever becoming what you were meant to be. So the question becomes this: how much of your life are you actually choosing? And how much is just being chosen for you? Distraction doesn't just make you lazy. It kills your ability to hold an inner dialogue, that sacred space where a man makes his decisions. A real man knows what he's doing, and more importantly, why he's doing it. But the modern man, he just does, because everyone else is doing it. He runs because he feels left behind. He scrolls because the silence feels empty. The greatest death doesn't come from outside. It begins the moment the lights go out inside you. When silence becomes uncomfortable. When there's nothing left to think except what to watch next. When every desire is a reflex, not a choice. So ask yourself, when was the last time you sat alone, without your phone? When was the last time you felt excited about a goal that had nothing to do with anyone else? When was the last time you told yourself, "This is what I must do, even if no one applauds me for it"? If you can't remember, that's not your personal failure. That's the tragedy of an era. Because this society is designed to kill male willpower, not with swords or war, but with excess. Too many choices. Too many feelings. Too many external distractions. You don't have to face lonely social media is here. You don't have to face emptiness, there's always a game. You don't have to face fear, there's always something to kill time. But because you no longer face anything, you no longer evolve. Distraction severs your connection from the internal command center, the place where your will, direction, and masculinity are forged. You may look healthy. You may speak logically. You may show up to work on time. But inside, you've become a machine waiting for instructions. No more will, only reaction. Carl Jung once said, "Man will do anything, no matter how absurdo, avoid facing his own soul." And today's man? He avoids his soul at all costs. Through work, through the internet, through sex, through status, through anything that spares him from asking, "Who am I? What am I doing?" But if you never ask if, you never dare to wait for an answer, then you are no longer living as a man. You are merely existing as a programmed device, running habits, reacting to inputs, consuming content, waiting for cues. Distraction is not harmless. It is the first stage of surrender. Every time you choose entertainment over mission, you're telling your will, "Be quiet, this isn't the time." And one day, it will listen, it will stay quiet, and never speak again. That is the moment your soul surrenders. A man doesn't need a motivational video every morning to get out of bed. He needs a reason to live big enough to shut up every excuse inside him. After you've seen how scattered you are, after you've felt the slow death of your own will, the solution is not temporary encouragement. It is reconstruction, brick by brick, steel beam by steel beam, from the ground up. And the first stone in that reconstruction? Discipline. Not self-punishment, not martyrdom, not guilt. Discipline is the act of choosing what's hard because it's right. It is saying no to what's easy, because the hard path is the only one that makes you real. Jocko Willink, former Navy SEAL commander, once said something that sounds paradoxical at first. Discipline equals freedom, but it's true. Because only when you can control your own behavior can you be free from needing anyone, anything, or any circumstance to give you direction. A disciplined man doesn't need motivation. He moves like a one-man army. No applause, no audience, no deadline. Because he knows every small act he completes today is a public declaration of who he's becoming tomorrow. But discipline doesn't live in a vacuum. It needs purpose. And true purpose doesn't come from outside. It's not in your 5-year plan. It's not about being successful like someone else. It comes when you sit down, in silence, and ask yourself one raw, dangerous question. What do I want to leave behind when I disappear from this world? That question sounds heavy, but men weren't born to live light. And this is what society never teaches you. A real man doesn't chase happiness. He builds meaning. The philosopher Aristotle called it Eudaimonia, the state of living in alignment with your highest personal ideal. Not pleasure, not comfort, but congruence between your actions and your inner compass. A man who finds his reason for being is no longer easily bought. You can't tempt him with flattery. You can't seduce him with dopamine. He becomes his own solar system. Self-spinning, self-burning, self-attracting. Want to get there? You don't need a giant leap. You start with tiny, consistent, unnegotiable actions. Wake up earlier than most men, not to prove anything, but to own your mind before the world grabs it. Train your body, not to look good, but to develop spiritual toughness. Turn off all notifications, because anything that hijacks your thoughts is a thief of freedom. Learn something difficult to keep your brain from going soft in a world of convenience. Discipline isn't there to make you a robot. It's there to give your soul a spine. A man who lives with discipline and purpose doesn't need to shout, "I'm strong." His presence alone makes others sit up straighter. But here's the twist. The most dangerous prison doesn't have walls. No guards, no chains. It has a soft bed, fast food, high-speed Wi-Fi, and a TV that's always on. You don't live there by force. You live there by choice. No one made you. Hit snooze 5 times every morning. Scroll instead of train. Stay quiet when you should have stood up. Every small compromise is one more brick in the prison you built for yourself. And the prison warden? He's not out there. He's the man in the mirror. The soft prison doesn't need locks. It keeps you just warm enough, just entertained enough, just fine enough, that you never hunger to break out. It convinces you that fine is good enough. But let me say it plainly. Find is poison. It is the slow death of all masculine ambition. Facing yourself is the hardest thing a man can ever do. Because it demands one thing: brutal honesty with the truth. The truth that many of your problems don't come from society, but from your refusal to face yourself. The truth that you don't lack time, you lack discipline. The truth that your loneliness isn't caused by the world, but by the severed connection between you and your own soul. And yet, from that moment of direct confrontation, a man begins to step out of the soft prison. You don't need a revolution. You just need to look straightened, not flinch. No more excuses. No more because. No more someday. There is only now or never. Want to break free? Begin with 3 actions. Write down the one truth you least want to face. Not for poetry. Not for performance. Just for honesty. Pick the one task you've been putting off the longest. Do it within 24 hours. Not perfectly. Just begin. Turn off everything that hijacks your attention for at least 3 days. See what's really left. When dopamine isn't holding your life together, a real man is not a man who never fails. He's the one who no longer needs to hide from himself. He doesn't need to perform. He doesn't need the crowd. There's only one known mission and one steep road. And when you live like that, everything else either keeps up with you or gets left behind. You can keep living the same way. Work, spend, scroll, rest, repeat. Be liked, be called nice, be praised for being easygoing, and slowly lose direction without even realizing it. Or you can choose the path no one dares to walk. The path of consciousness, the path of discipline, the path of gravity. Not because it's easy, not because it's quick, but because it's the only path that leads to true freedom. Aldous Huxley warned us long ago. The most effective form of tyranny is the one in which people love their servitude. And today's world has achieved exactly that. Not through chains, but through comfort. Not through violence, but through pleasure. Not through restriction, but through the pampering of your weakness. So, if you want your freedom back, you don't need to destroy the system. You only need to no longer depend on it. Freedom doesn't come from parties. It doesn't come from paperwork. It doesn't come from permission. Freedom begins when you know who you are and refuse to live as a watered-down version of yourself. You are the pillar, the axis, the center of gravity. When you stand tall, your family, your team, your generation, they align around you, seeking direction. But if you collapse, everything quietly falls apart. So here is the declaration. You were not born to be a nice guy by consumer society standards. You were born to be a man of weight, of direction, of real impact. You won't get applause. You will be misunderstood. You will be alone. But you will be free. Free from begging to be loved. Free from needing to prove your worth. Free from the weakling the world tried to shape you into since childhood. Freedom begins with discipline. It is fortified by intentional choices. It grows through consistency. And it exists in the storm, never in the comfort zone. This is the moment to rise. Not to scream that you're strong, but to walk in silence and live like a man who remembers why he was born. You don't need approval. You don't need the spotlight. You only need a mission and a decision to never turn back. The chains are invisible, but they can be broken. The path is rough, but it leads to greatness. Choose and walk forward like a man who's remembered his reason for existence. You have lived long enough to know no one is coming to save you. There is no magical morning where everything clicks. No sudden dawn where you wake up drenched in clarity, discipline, motivation, and a luminous reason for living, perfectly plated beside your breakfast. Instead, each morning is a negotiation between the part of you that wants to rise and the part that only wants to scroll a little longer. Between the part that knows your life is being fragmented into dead pockets of time and the part that numbly lets it happen. And the truth is, unless there is a radical intervention from within, you will go on this way perfectly logical, perfectly fine, and perfectly dead inside. You don't need anyone to tell you you're addicted, not just to your phone, not just to the content. You're addicted to being pulled away from yourself. Every time an uncomfortable emotion arises, boredom, sadness, doubt, anxiety, you reach. Your fingers move before your thoughts catch up. Your feelings barely have names before they're drowned in dopamine. And the terrifying part is, you know this. You know you're reacting like an animal trained to return to the easiest reward, and you still don't stop. Not because you're weak, but because you've been programmed too deeply to fear your own emptiness. Because without the sound, without the images, without something to distract you, you are left alone in the brutal silence of yourself. And in that silence, a truth you cannot outrun stands before you. You no longer know who you are. You no longer know what's yours and what's a reflex. You don't know what beliefs are truly yours, and what are echoes assembled from millions of videos, ads, posts, quotes. You realize the self you've clung to, the goals, the taste, the dreams was largely curated, borrowed, crafted from noise. And when that realization arrives, the first existential panic sets in. Because you understand, if I'm no longer me, then what am I? That's when the deepest part of you, the one that has been quiet for so long, begins to whisper. Not with words, but with sensation. A dull ache in your chest, a ghostly pull towards something unnamed, a tremor that makes you want to cut, quit, turn. But then, you open your phone. Because in the middle of a metaphysical collapse, you reach for something familiar, soothing, controllable. And so another loop begins. Another orbit around your center, another year gone. And all the while, the world applauds you for being disciplined, forward-thinking, modern, for knowing how to treat yourself, for being so balanced. And you believe it, because it's the last thing you hear before the truest part of you goes silent for good. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." You are not addicted, you are being controlled by a part of your psyche you've never dared to look at. And that's what makes you believe you're living on instinct, when in fact, you're being driven by an escape from a pain you never learned how to name. The pain of being left behind as a child. The pain of realizing you were never enough to be truly seen. The pain of becoming a grown-up, far too soon learning how to be good just to avoid abandonment. And you carry that pattern into adulthood. Work hard, perform well, achieve more just to be loved. But when that love leaves, you collapse. Because deep down, none of it ever made you feel enough. Not to them, not to the world, and not even to yourself. Because you never loved yourself, you only tried to become a version that others might find acceptable. And when the external validation disappears, you fall into the abyss that only men truly know. The black hole of a self abandoned by itself. You tried to heal by changing jobs, entering new relationships, exercising, learning meditation, reading self-help. But the thing you fear most remains silence, absolute silence. No music, no narration, no cheering. Just you with everything you've never dared to face. And if you never learn how to stay in that silence, you will continue to live as a conditioned reflex programmed to repeat yourself beneath newer, shinier skins. Freedom does not come from having more choices. Freedom comes when you can be with yourself without distraction, without being understood, without needing to do anything at all. Just presence, whole, unfiltered, like a soul finally returning to its original form. And from that place, everything true can begin. Your purpose, your discipline, your recovery. Not from motivation, not from inspiration, but from a clarity that has waited too long to come home. You will never see yourself in the light until you are willing to look at yourself in the dark. But once you do, once you truly do, the world may not change, but you will. You'll stop running. You'll stop demanding. You'll simply act as a natural consequence of having seen the truth. And nothing is more dangerous than a man who is awake. Nothing is more unshakable than a man who has faced himself and refused to look away. The world will continue as it always has. Social media will still suggest what you used to crave. Your friends will still talk about how busy they are. The system will keep whispering, "You're fine. Just take a little break." But you, if you are awake, will no longer be the same. You will no longer laugh because you're stimulated. No longer grieve because you're excluded. No longer make decisions out of fear of being left behind. You won't become special. You'll simply return to the version of you abandoned when you were still a boy. The one who could play for hours alone without boredom. The one who could cry over something real. The one who didn't need applause to know he was living rightly. And if you can hold on to that connection long enough, you won't need validation anymore. Because every step you take, every habit you build, every time you reject the easy dopamine, will become a quiet signal to the universe that you are alive. Not just as a body reacting, but as a soul that has begun to glow. You won't be able to pretend forever. No matter how many layers of performance you wear, the kind man, the good son, the agreeable husband, the ever-available friend, there will come a moment when you stand before a mirror and meet a gaze that no longer knows who you are. Not because you've lost your way, but because you've gone too far from yourself while thinking you were doing the right thing. The worst betrayal doesn't come from others, it comes from you, when you slowly sacrifice the truest parts of yourself in exchange for temporary comfort. And then you begin to wonder, is it wrong to want a life larger than the loop of work, duties, entertainment, sleep? Is it wrong that easy pleasures feel suspicious? Is it normal that you no longer feel satisfied chasing what everyone else seems willing to die for? If you've asked these questions, keep them. They are not signs of crisis. They are soul alarms ringing in the dark. You weren't born to repeat a sequence optimized by algorithms. You weren't born to know the right time to hydrate, to train, to sleep, to post, to respond. You were born to stretch the edges of yourself, to move beyond fear, to push toward a land only you can see, the land of meaning. But you can't reach it if you're still letting yourself be steered by what merely seems reasonable. In this age, reasonableness has become the lullaby that rocks millions of competent men to spiritual sleep. And because you're intelligent, you're dangerous. Because you know how to fool yourself with all things good. More studying, more focus, more reading, more productivity. But deep down, you know what you're running from. You don't lack knowledge. You lack honesty with yourself. And because no one's forcing you to stop and face it, you continue, more efficient, more busy, but further and further from the reason you began it all. And then one day, you'll no longer be able to bear it. Not from overwhelm, but from emptiness. You'll sit in a perfectly furnished room, in a stable life, and feel yourself gasping between two poles. A burning hunger and a numbness born of being over-controlled by correctness. And if you're lucky, you'll collapse. Because only when you collapse can you rebuild from the part of you that was once cast aside in order to be the adult. That's when you'll understand. Recovery doesn't begin with doing the right thing. It begins with the courage to sit still with yourself. No distractions, no masks, no urgency. And in that silence, you'll hear the voices of the ones you've abandoned. The child who waited to be heard, but never was. The teen who dreamed of something grand, but was told to be realistic. The man who once wanted to live by principle, but was told he was too intense. All of them still alive inside you, waiting to be led home. You can't love another fully until you've loved that part of yourself. You can't teach anyone how to grow until you've granted yourself the right to be real at least once. You cannot lead, write, build, heal, or create if you're still running. And you know this. No one needs to tell you. You just need to stop ignoring it. The world doesn't need more pleasant men. It needs men with gravity. Men who don't drift with trends. Who don't obey unspoken scripts. Who don't react to be liked. It needs men who can stand still in noise, guarding their soul like one protects fire in the wind. And if you are such a man, don't expect to be understood. Don't demand the perfect partner. Don't wait for a suitable era. Live now as if you're holding a shard of truth the world isn't ready for. And if someone looks at you with fear, smile. Because they're not afraid of you. They're afraid of the part inside them that died long ago, and that you've just awakened.